Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Welcome everybody to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about the 4 pillars of freedom: financial, time, location, emotional freedom. And the podcast has grown such that I'm not only interviewing doctors, but now it's high income earners, impact coaches, marketers, entrepreneurs. And so in that light, today we have Dai Manuel, and he's got a fantastic story. He's an author, he's a TEDx speaker, he's a life coach, and he's going to share his experience and wisdom for the audience. So Dai, welcome.
Well, thanks, Christopher. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And, I got to say, when you drop the word wisdom, I was like, man, I need my kids to hear that, because I don't think they see me as being all that wise, but maybe that's just kids and how they look at their parents, right? It's not until we're older that we often look back and think, oh yeah, they were pretty wise, but they're kind of in that stage where they're both teenagers. It's like, yeah, that's never right. So thank you for the kind intro. And it's just awesome to be here.
Yeah. For the audience, tell listeners about, how you got to where you are, and we'll go from there.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'll give you the abbreviated version, because obviously trying to compact 45 years into 45 seconds. Hey, it's a challenge, but I'm up for it. Okay. I grew up outside of Toronto, so on the eastern side of Canada. I live in Vancouver, Canada. I've been here for my entire adult life, and we've done quite a bit of extensive travel. I'll get into that in a little bit here, but I moved out west because I wanted to reinvent myself. I mean, how many of us get to a place in life where we grow up or we experience certain things and we just think, gosh, wouldn't it be cool if we had a do-over? And so for me, I graduated high school at 18 and I was like, okay, peace out. I'm moving out west, and it almost sounds like that song, right? Go west, young man. But I went west, and I landed in Vancouver to go to University of British Columbia. But a big driving factor wasn't actually school; it was the outdoors. I love Western Canada. I love the Rockies. If anybody's been to Vancouver, you come here once and it's a hard place to leave because it's beautiful. Of course I'm biased, but hey, with good reason, and I moved away from Ontario as well because I had a lot of stigmas attached to me based on how I was as a teen. I was morbidly obese as a teenager. And I'm sure you deal with people in various states of health just based on your profession. And, when you deal with people in their morbid obesity, there's a lot of health complications, a lot of other symptoms as a result of that state of unhealth. And I was living it. I was a walking cliche. And I made some big changes, which also inspired me to change internally, emotionally, psychologically, even spiritually. And so I wanted to go someplace where nobody knew me. And so I moved out west and got into university. And then, just started to carve my own path and try to figure things out. Now I'm still trying to figure things out, 25 years later, at 45, a couple kids later, been dating my wife for the last 22 years. And I've also built and exited out of my one main business. And then I've started a couple others. My core business was fitness equipment and retail. So it was fitness equipment, accessories, supplements, apparel. Did it all across Canada and had an e-com business that was also quite extensive. And but I wasn't feeling fulfilled and made some changes in my early, I'd say mid-30s, that I just didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted something more fulfilling, more in alignment with some of my values that I was developing as I was maturing, especially as a dad, as a husband, as a community leader and contributor. And so again, found myself wanting to reinvent myself again. And so I quit a career 17 years. A month later, my wife quit her career. We pulled the kids out of school 2 months after that. And we said, okay, where are we going? I don't know, but let's just go traveling. And so we went for 5 years traveling around the world. And we ended up in Bali for 2.5 of those years. moved back to Vancouver right before the pandemic so my kids could finish high school. And boom, here we are. I'm talking to you today, so you can unpack whatever you want out of that, Christopher.
Yeah, we'll get started. We'll talk about the struggle. How do you deal with the struggle of the juggle that is all things life?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Like when we think about the struggle with the juggle, and I'm someone that I'm a writer, so anything that offers alliteration or even just helps us create a picture in our own mind, right? But if you think about just the juggle, like we always have multiple things going on, and I don't care really who you are. I mean, you could be a nomadic monk and you still got a lot of stuff going on in your world. So it's trying to remember that we all are struggling at various times in our life and at various periods. And often we're all struggling, but we just don't know that we're all struggling because we often try to keep to our own silo and sometimes we don't talk about the struggles. And I know for myself, when I started opening up about some of my struggles that I've been, let's say, enduring, for the last 3 or 4 years, more appropriately, if I go back almost 5 years, I started to, and this is actually sort of piggybacks into my TEDx talk. What I talked about last year was this idea that vulnerability can be a skill, and it can be a skill that all of us can develop. But I was really there to try to speak to men, because men being vulnerable, we have a certain negative connotation typically attached to that idea. We see vulnerability as a weakness, as a way of potentially being used. If we share something that might be too private and that someone takes that and uses it against us. And so because of this, our relationship with that idea of being vulnerable and opening up is challenging.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I started to experiment and to do a little bit more with that opening up, especially around other men. And it changed everything for me, Christopher, like literally everything. Because all of a sudden I'd start to put my hand up and like, man, I'm really struggling with this. And for me, it was also just, I transitioned from brick and mortar. And now I started to build businesses solely online. So you can imagine there's just a learning curve. And I was struggling with trying to figure it out and all the differences and the nuances, especially between those two different industries. And I started opening up to some other guys about just my frustration and how I was feeling negative about myself. And the funny thing was, 3 other guys around this table of men that I was hanging out with, 3 of these guys put their hands up and said, oh man, welcome to the club. We're struggling with that too. And I was like, really? Oh, okay. I'm not alone in my struggle. I'm not alone in all this frustration, because all of a sudden when you connect to somebody else that can relate to whatever you're working through and challenged by, man, there's something to that, because it just makes it not so alone and more easily navigatable, and so anyways, yeah, that's sort of, you talk about the struggle of life. I'm like, if we just all start talking about some of our struggles, we'll soon realize that there's people that are willing and ready to help us, but so that's sort of what I've learned in the last 5 years. We'll say that.
Interesting. You remind me of Gary Vee. He recently wrote a book, 12 and a half.
Oh, I haven't read that one. I haven't even heard of that book. So that's must be brand new. Is that just come out?
Came out, yeah, it's recently. And
okay.
He talks about kindness and vulnerability and how
Really?
that's not a weakness, but it's a strength. So and then you also, what's interesting is you talk about how to be a champion of change and not a victim. And you talked about this whole life fitness manifesto. To tell us more about that, and because your energy is very high, that's very admirable. It's combination of your diet, your mindset, and your physical activity.
Thank you. I appreciate those kind words, and nothing comes without making a choice first, right? And then following it up with an action. And so I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. And a lot of people don't know this about me. And especially people, if there's somebody that, your first time connecting with me is on this conversation with Christopher, I'll tell you right now, sure, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're all have a lot of interesting pieces that make us up and experiences that brought us where we are. And I got to let you know, like I, especially because of being that morbidly obese teen, I dealt with a lot of anxiety and depression growing up. And it never went away. It's there. I've just learned healthier ways of managing it. And now, in the last decade, how prominent the conversation around mental health is, there's more and more tools and resources and support networks coming available for all of us. And I got to tell you, I'm naturally a closeted introvert. Okay, so I deal with social anxiety still. Like my happy place is being by myself or with immediate family, people that I know really well, because it's just not a natural thing for me. But and speaking to you, why did you start this podcast? One of the big reasons for you was to create a space where you could provide great impact in people's lives by highlighting stories and sharing conversations. And it's phenomenal. And I had a drive. I wanted to make an impact as well. And I realized I was going to have to be able to step outside of this anxiety bubble that I was putting myself in. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, but I choose to do it. And because it does make me feel fulfilled at the end of the day, knowing that I can make an impact in somebody else's life and let them know that, hey, me too. I get it. I've been there. I know it's hard. It sucks, but don't worry. You're not alone, and you will get through this. I truly believe that to my core, that when people want to work through something challenging, they can. Which leads me to this whole idea of being a champion of change rather than feeling like we're a victim of change. So many of our circumstances that we find ourselves, we often will just default to believing that it's outside of our control, and you just got to live with whatever comes. And I don't necessarily believe that, because we are very quick to say all or everything. We make these blanket statements that are all encompassing, right? But if we actually take a second to think about it, it's like, is that true? Like that statement, like, I'm always feeling nervous and anxious when I get in front of people. Is that true? Do I really feel that way? I'm like, yeah. Okay, but what can I do about that? What can I do to start to push myself outside of that if I truly don't want to feel that way anymore? And so for me, fortunately, I found an organization called Toastmasters, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, nonprofit, global organization to help you with becoming a more effective leader, but also a more effective communicator. And I've been part of that organization for about 13 years. So it helped me tremendously to come out of my shell, so to speak, and to be able to channel the nervous energy into more of an excited energy and an energy that I can deliver, and share. Where before it was that anxious energy, which would keep me like in a shell and avoiding any of these types of conversations, right? But this is my point, is that the only difference between being a champion of change or a victim of change is the choices that we make. Like, quite frankly, if we really think about it, often it's our choices and then either action or inaction that we follow those choices with that provides us with the result or the opportunity to gain the experience that we've set out to gain or lesson to learn. And so the biggest thing is, once you really start to see that you can be the protagonist of change in your own life, and you start to revisit past memories of where you've experienced drastic change, you'll realize that it's already in you. All of us have this natural resiliency inside of us that allows us to endure and navigate the hard stuff. And we can often come out the other side a bit more resilient, a little bit stronger, maybe a bit more clear, but usually a lot more confident, because we gain that experience in ourselves and realize, geez, I helped make that happen. I did certain things and certain actions and put myself into a certain situation to learn what it was I wanted to learn to get to that next level of growth. This might sound overly optimistic, or rather like I'm looking at the world through pink lenses, but I tell you, I'd rather look at it that way than the other way. And that's just my choice again. This perspective, right? So, I mean, I don't know, what do you think about it? Like, what's been the hardest change that you've had to endure in your life? I'm just really curious.
Yeah, I mean, like, change is always. It's since 2008. It's when I became a full-time entrepreneur, I have to deal with change all the time. Then it was the 2020, then 2021, going back, and then now we have a recession. So it's almost like it's like every day now. So, but you have to control your mindset, and just you have to control your reactions to things and your perspective. So
easier said than done, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's the risk you take for being an entrepreneur, is you have to, you don't have that stability and safety of a job. So but
isn't it also interesting that we often feel like we're on an island as entrepreneurs? And I've heard that analogy, or that it's almost a cliche now, right? And we hear that so frequently. But you think about it, if it's a cliche and we're all saying that, why don't we do something about it? Like, why don't we actually address this thing and start opening up with one another? And, when I got my first business coach, or I should say when I went to the solely being online, and this sort of shifted away from my brick and mortar operation, I found a coach to work with to help me navigate that, and to be almost a mentor for me. And I know that opened up the world to me because it just shared different perspective, and because my vision was very limited, right? Very tunnel. Because I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was stepping into as an entrepreneur in this new space. And I couldn't rely on everything that I gained in those 17 years of building my business. I built it up to like 8 figures a year, right? Like, it was a good business, and it's still going strong. I'm just not an active partner in it any longer, but it was a great business. I learned a lot doing that business, but transitioning into something that I thought was going to be a lot easier. I'm just being honest. I was overly confident. I'm like, I know how to do this. How hard can this be? Holy smokes. Famous last words. So there's been lots of ups and downs these last, I guess 7 years now since I transitioned away from my old business, and it's a lot of fun. Year after year, it's growing. So that's a good thing. But, it's not growing. Well, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say it to you right now. I know the only reason why it hasn't grown as quickly as it could, because of me, because there's been times where I think I've been afraid of growth, to be honest, and I keep saying that, but I'm just being truthful with you, I think the growth intimidates me at times, because there's the idea of, oh my gosh, gonna have to have over 100 employees again and all those contractors. Like, I start thinking about all the work that entails when you start to build something of scale like that, and it scares me and intimidates me, and that's something I'm actively working through again over the last 6 months, like specifically that. So I thought that was probably appropriate to share that right now, just based on our conversation we're having.
Yeah. You have so much experience, life experience, and what's interesting is what do you think is the best way to manage change in one's life?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, I think a lot of what, think about, how do we gain clarity in life? It's often by asking questions and then thinking about the questions and really reflecting, introspecting, or it also will open up our eyes, the right type of questions that, man, there is a lot I just don't know yet. And it sort of points us in the direction of gaining knowledge, awareness, wisdom, if you will, So I think what would be most useful to answer that question is I have 3 questions I always work through whenever I feel that there's a need for change again, whether the change is being forced upon me or I'm freely going after change. Would it be helpful to share those 3 questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Here we go. All right. Question 1. Can I do this? Right. This being whatever that change is. That first question is a big one. To ask yourselves, okay, can I do this? Like, for me, transitioning away from my old business into this new venture, can I actually do this? And to be fair, at the time I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. I got some knowledge, I got some understanding, I've done business before, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, I can do this. So you get this false sort of confidence, I guess. At least I was in that situation. But I recognized, I know I couldn't be fully confident going down that path, because I already knew that there was going to be areas I wasn't fluid in. I didn't have the knowledge or the wisdom. But at least in answering that question, can I do this? It opened my eyes to different areas that I hadn't thought of yet. Because it's almost like a free flow, like a brainstorming session, when you start to scribble down all the possible answers of, can I do this? Well, yeah, I can. Here's why. Most importantly, you got to get to a yes on question 1 before you can go on to question 2. So work through question 1. Can I do this? Can I make this change? As a 15-year-old morbidly obese teenager, I was like, can I actually get healthy? And I was like, well, I don't know if I can. I have no idea how to do it. I've spent 5 years of my developmental years, watching TV, playing video games, and eating junk food. So all of a sudden today, for me to say, can I go and get healthy as that morbidly obese teen? Trust me, I was not going to say, yeah, I can do this. Let's go. I wasn't there. Okay. So I recognized I needed help. I needed knowledge. I needed to grow my experience, as well as my experience with myself actually doing new things. So I got to a yes. Okay, because if I start to do that stuff, can I do this? Can I actually do the change? Yes. So once you get to a yes, you go to question 2. If I do this, will it work? You know, because that's a bummer of a question, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, well, like I'm just going back to when I was morbidly obese, right? Like as that teen, sure, I got to this place where I went to the library, I got books out on fitness and nutrition. My parents went because I wanted to go get a mountain bike because I knew how to bike. I liked biking as a kid. I was like, okay, there's an activity that I enjoy and I can do it by myself. It's very solitary. I don't need to be around anybody or with anybody because at that time I didn't want anybody around me. You know, I didn't. I wanted to do it on my own because I was embarrassed and self-conscious. All right. I'm just, you know, full disclosure. That's how I was feeling. So I didn't want anybody around me. So I got a mountain bike. Either way, I went and I got these things. And then I was like, okay, well, I still don't know how to do this. But if I start to move my body a bit more, I start to change how I eat. Do I think this will work? Will this start to make me healthier? And what you have to do is you sort of have to trust yourself to start the initial part of the journey of whatever those changes are, at least going in that direction. Because in those first few steps, you learn, you gain awareness and knowledge and wisdom about this. But it also starts to grow your confidence, especially if you can get some quick wins in. You know, quick little wins right in the beginning creates this positive momentum and energy that will fuel us to keep going. And for me, you know, is in that first 6 weeks, there was this big mountain. Okay. And I say a mountain, I'm from the West Coast. There are mountains here. These are the Rockies. Where I grew up outside of Toronto, you know, what I related as a mountain, being a 15-year-old on a mountain bike, trying to go up this little hill, which, you know, still in my recollection, wasn't a little hill. It was hard, you know, again, very unhealthy, out of shape, on a mountain bike, trying to go up this hill. And I thought it was a mountain. I thought it was Everest. And I remember the first time I tried going up it, I got to a third of the way up and the bike like literally stopped. Like, you know, like when you're working so hard and it's like nothing's moving, it felt like I froze in time. It was just like, and then boom, you know, fall over. Now, my normal mindset would be, okay, well, turn around. You just failed, go home. But I knew that I committed to these changes. I trusted that if I start doing these things and I keep doing them, we'll start to see good things happening. 6 weeks into this, one ride, I made it all the way to the top without getting off the bike.
Nice.
At that moment, I believed I could do anything I put my mind to. You know, because I could do it. I did it. I was seeing the changes and experiencing the changes, and it was making me feel excited. And so that question, you know, can I do this? Will it work? Oh yeah, I was a hell yes, this is working. You know, so it allowed me to keep going. Now you got to follow it up with question 3. This one takes more time, and often people need help in order to work through this to get to the answer. But the question is it worth it? When I'm working with organizations, teams, companies, I can use it. But when we're talking to people like you and I in an everyday conversation, we have to frame the question differently. We have to say, am I worth it? That's not an easy one to answer. You know, as that teenager back then, I didn't believe I was worth it. I didn't believe I had any value. And as such, you know, I kept soothing myself with food. You know, I was an emotional eater. That's how I managed stress, anxiety, overwhelm, depression, happiness. I mean, it didn't matter. If I had an emotion, I was eating. And that was my habit. You know, I didn't believe I was worth the change. But the people I was around, the people that I had in my life that were closest to me, I intimated that I wanted to make some changes, that I wanted to be healthy, that I wanted to make some, you know, to be different. And they were like, you can do this. You're so worth it. We love you. You know, we're here to help you. That allowed me to at least get to a place where I was like, I think I can. I think I'm worth this. I may not have fully believed it yet, but I thought, you know, I was starting to see that crack in the door and I could start to see the light coming through. So I always like to share that with people, you know, those 3 questions, because you got to get to a place where you're like, yeah, I'm worth it. I'm worth the change. I'm worth the effort. I'm worth the work. I'm worth the results. And so keep these 3 questions, you know, front of mind anytime you're navigating any change in life, whether it's invited or not. You know, can I do this? If I do this, will it work? And then lastly, am I worth it? Those 3 will help you navigate even the most challenging of changes. And I'm speaking from experience. I've done this many times, even when I gave up alcohol 13 years ago, because I struggled with alcohol abuse. It's funny, I got away from the food and I learned how to then medicate my emotions with alcohol. So I just changed one vice to the next. But, you know, I'm happy to say, you know, it's been 13 years since I've had a drink, and it's not even front of mind. But again, that was another period of big change for me too. So we all navigate it, right? What do you think about those 3 questions? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they're really they're powerful questions because they dive into the heart of the matter and just about change and whether it's worth it. And it's kind of it's almost like you're cutting through all of the BS and just getting down to the point. So, and that's usually to affect change, it either physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually. You have to cut away all the rationalizations and all the excuses and cut to the chase. So that's a very powerful framework. So
thank you.
Hopefully
it helps.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people are interested. You've given a lot of value, and people are interested in following you, visiting your website or contacting you. So how can they do that?
Oh, well, thanks, Christopher. I'm pretty simple to find if you understand my name. I got a really unique name. Dai, D-A-I, is actually Welsh, and it means David. Same like, how we might have friends like Thomas and Tom, or Richard and Dick being the short pet form. Dai is the pet form of David if you were over in Wales or parts of the UK. Anyway, so that's my namesake, because I am a David, but my dad was a David. So to keep the confusion down, they just always called me by my Welsh name. But yet my last name, Manuel, M-A-N-U-E-L, Portuguese last name. Welsh and Portuguese. And as I say, put it together, what do you got? Well, I'm a good Canadian. So there you go. So, and all of us up here are mixes, which I love, such a great community of just great people up here. But as anywhere, what I say to everybody, if you can spell my name, you'll find me on any social platform, as well as I have a website, daimanuel.com, about 1,700 articles. I've been blogging for the last 15 and a half, almost 16 years now. I've been sharing content to help people get more out of life. Nice. And the first way that you get more out of life is you just got to get out of your own way. And if you're ready to do that, oh man, go have some fun, get on the website. The new one launches in about a month. It'll be a lot easier to navigate all that content. But for now, hey, there's you've probably heard of Alice in Wonderland. Well, there's the rabbit hole. Go on and down and just see what you learn.
Yeah. And for all the audience and all the listeners out there, all of Dai's resources will be in the links and show notes. And look for his TED Talk on YouTube. I'm gonna check it out right after this. So
thank you, Christopher.
Yeah,
oh, man. Really
been
appreciate
a
it.
great conversation. And like I said, I always love talking to interesting people. And as long as I pick up new things and can share it with others, it's a win. So
thank you. I just have to say, I appreciate what you're doing. I know it's no small feat to put this kind of content and to be consistently putting content out and creating a space for these conversations to happen. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for contributing and adding this to the world, because you can't help but pick up any TV or go on a lot of social networks, and it's just a lot of negative filling the feed. We have to freaking fix the algorithm. The only way to do that is we have to overpower it with positive stuff. and so I just want to say thank you for contributing to that fight, and I'm excited to not only be on the show, but also become a longtime listener. So yeah, just thanks a lot.
I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.